Well, hello and welcome to the first negative modifier live stream. We're here to talk about NIMBY, our most recent campaign. But first, or I guess story arc, not campaign. But everyone knows me by now. I've been around and done plenty of talking. I'm gonna give the rest of the cast a second to actually introduce themselves. Let's start with, I guess, who wants to go first in typical Delta Green fashion, if you will.
I'll go first.
All right.
So my name is Alex. But in the campaign, I am Javier John Foxtrot. I think my last name's Cortez. I forget. And yeah, so that is me.
We don't use it much, no.
I don't
No,
think we've ever really touched upon that.
no, actually, I've done a very good job about playing up that CIA quiet, like, oh, you guys don't actually really know my name. Everyone just calls me John, but yeah,
Yeah.
no, my character's actual name is Javier.
All right, and next.
What's up? My name is Chad. I play Father Faustus, and this is kind of my first little run through of Delta Green after uh, being introduced to it. So, trying to figure out how to play it seriously.
Last but not least.
Yeah, I'm Dylan. I play Dr. Florence or Alexandria. I've played Delta Green a bit, but I think that this has probably been my favorite campaign so far. So
Well, thank you for that. And yeah, we are negative modifier FCL. You may know me as Miss Pine, most notably at this point. And we're here to answer your various questions you may or may not have about NIMBY so far. This is a unique live stream in that this is the only one we're going to do for this that will be live before anyone but me knows how this crazy train ride ends. We're still recording kind of Hawthorne's Crusade as we go. We had a major revelation the last recording session of kind of the nature of the things. We have entered the end game, if you will, of this whole crazy ride we've been on. But yes, only I know what awaits next, but we're not here to talk about that. We'll have several live streams for that and many hours of podcast to get through. But welcome. Please post your questions in chat. We'll get to them towards the end of this. We got some stuff we want to talk about. I'm assuming you three have some questions about NIMBY. We've talked about this so much we've been going for some clarifications. Anything you think that maybe people listening would like to know about NIMBY that we've talked about behind the scenes? We're gonna talk about Vicky eventually as part of this. I feels glib talking about it this way, but whenever people ask me before we start airing episodes, "Hey, what should we expect from the new season of Negative Modifier?" I'm like, "It's darker." Really quickly, like there's a moment in the first arc where it definitely sets itself apart from our prior seasons, and you'll know it when you get there. And I don't think I was kidding on that one, but
Yeah,
yeah,
no, very very accurate.
yeah,
yeah,
we did the very Delta Green thing.
that we did. But we'll get to that in a couple minutes. But yeah, so you guys have been the ones playing through it. What have your thoughts been on NIMBY so far? Maybe it's kind of hard to think back and looking back to where we're at now versus where we started off with all this. It's a different time.
Um, I guess my question to you as the GM is: would you expect us to be as pyromaniac like as we have been throughout the journey so far?
Yes, but also no. Like, all right, so let's get into that some. So NIMBY is partially designed where half the cast, Agent Francis and Agent Florence, are veteran Delta Green agents. They also have to be veteran Delta Green players. I can't expect new Delta Green players that have had some experience with the game, but maybe not the depth required for all this crazy stuff to kind of go right into kind of how do you clean up a basement full of monster sinew and corpse piles. So definitely kind of in the same way that we used Last Things Last at the start of JSL files as kind of the hey, welcome to Delta Green as a whole. NIMBY's kind of the yeah, we have half new agents and we have half veteran agents, and fire solves a lot of problems, except when it doesn't. And then it's an uphill battle.
Yeah.
How were you like crafting the story actually, kind of in regards to the characters that we had kind of brought up? Because I know that when we had talked about character creation and everything else of the sort, like did that make such an impact or whatever have you, or was it more so just like, hey, there's kind of these like little seeds that you kind of just went off of when we finally were like, hey, this is who we're playing.
Well, I think we'll get into this more as we kind of get through more of the season, but I think kind of what I've always liked about Delta Green is you can just kind of throw a bunch of agents at any given campaign or operation, and the story involves there because you can't cover all the skills. Like the fact that at this point in time, FCell is 2.5 hitters and 1 scientist and 1 investigatory person, but 2 of those hitters are really hard hitters. It makes for an interesting dynamic where it's like, yeah, you're gonna get better over time or die trying, and the whole investigatory aspect of these things. Like, you guys are splitting up beautifully, where it's like, okay, yeah, you're being kind of forced at your elements, and that's I think where the fun of it lies. But yeah, it's also one of those things where kind of like I don't prepare for every single question you guys ask me, so it's a bit of improving my way through all that stuff, and it evolves from there.
It's yes ending for your life at this point in time.
I It's Delta Green. You can't prepare for everything. It's just not possible. It's half the fun of it.
Hmm, hmm.
Yeah, I would say that NIMBY is it was a very good precursor to the rest of the campaign. Very easy slide into Delta Green before we get into some really Delta Green stuff later down the line.
Oh, it's such a Delta Green concept. The really Delta Green parts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't really think it could get as Delta Green as it was and whatnot. Charlie introduced me to Delta Green through a secondary group, and it was a very arcade style of Delta Green. Just kind of like we have point A, point B, let's go. And that's actually where Father Faustus was born.
Yeah, so you actually want to talk about that?
Yeah.
Because at least Francis and Florence are from how I initially met Dylan, kind of thing. Like that's kind of the continuation of those characters. Like we met on a different actual play podcast. I was a player on that one, and the polarizing Agent Fiddlesticks is my character from that.
Um, so it was kind of like a Delta Green one-off, and Charlie had introduced like the game to us and whatnot. I love my group, but at the same time, it's a very gaggle of geese kind of individuals. Trying to explore like what exactly Delta Green plays like and how different it is from Starfinder, which is what we usually go for.
Yeah.
Um, of course, as a player, I'm just like, hey, let's go with something that I think would just be funny. So I came up with the concept of a boxing Catholic priest. I think it was a different name under that. I don't think it was like F-Cell.
It wasn't F-Cell, it was something else, but it was everything else was like, okay, how do we make this character work in actual Delta Green? It's like, that was an assault scenario because new times, but yeah. No, yeah, it's kind of fun playing with some characters that in theory have some history. I'm not sure we mentioned it much in NIMBY, but we do kind of reference back to operations that will never hit the podcast because they are unfortunately lost to time, and they're kind of fun because it gives the characters kind of an extra depth of like, oh no, they know each other from things you're never going to know about, but kind of they allude to it enough. It's like, okay, these are indeed veterans. They've seen some stuff, and we will definitely get into kind of. We have an entire operation that admittedly kind of revolves a little bit around, or it leads up to a. Hey, remember that thing that happened prior to this campaign starting? I didn't forget about it.
I think that's a great thing though, in the sense that like not everything in Delta Green has to be explained.
Yeah,
You
nor
could
should
really
it.
just you could really just kind of chalk it up to just like, oh, it is what it is.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
that's
no.
kind of part of the mystery, which makes it really fun. And Charlie, like, you don't get enough credit putting together those really nice storylines. Like, I have had a lot of fun going down the rabbit hole of these storylines of like, oh, this and that, and like I mean, there are a few things I'm like, oh, okay, I kind of see it, but then like this past weekend, like, I mean, obviously this is gonna be a while before this episode comes out, but was not expecting some things to go down the way they did, and so I just actually want to give you credit for like putting together some really wonderful storylines. Like,
Yeah, no, and I'm looking forward to people getting into kind of the crazier parts of Hawthorne's Crusade. I think it's people have said a couple times like, I'm really enjoying N.I.M.B.Y, but that's great. I think it's the worst part of all of Hawthorne's Crusade, and it's still pretty fun. Like, but it's also the start of like you get 2/3 of the way through the operation before the actual point of the operation kicks in. It's like, oh no, this
yeah,
is the introduction to the actual campaign. Welcome to Vicky O'Neill's house, where things get dark.
it's a very Delta Green Avengers style build-up because you have like these like side build-up like you have like these side build-up stories of like, oh, okay, these little things, but like it comes together, and
Well, I think Well, I think what you guys have done a really good job of doing, like one of the cool things about Delta Green is you can do the side stories so effectively. And in kind of defiance to tabletop RPG logic and self-preservation instincts in that category, you all have been fantastic about kind of being like, no, it makes sense for me to go do this by myself. And that's what makes it feels like an investigation. I think our next arc, the Feast of the Century Club, really highlights the fact that you have two kind of, at some points, I think even we get up to four different kind of forks of investigation running at the same time. It's just, yeah, this is how you cover ground. This is what you have to do this fast. But getting ahead of ourselves, we'll talk about Feast of the Century Club when we get to that and
Yeah.
some at the
yeah.
end of the show.
He
I
thought
guess I should
NIMBY was bad.
I guess I should also mention that the person that played Agent Francis is in chat. If you got some questions specifically for him, he can chime in for that stuff. But yeah, no, it's always fun seeing the rubber hit the road, if you will, for campaigns I come up with. Like Jake Cell is such an introduction to Delta Green, and then Hawthorne's Crusade is me being like, okay, let's start throwing some actual lore stuff around. Like it's very much a continuation through. Once you know what to look for, it's like, okay, yeah, no, that's the through line. Damn it.
I think it's really interesting, especially as a player or like participant in negative modifier who actually doesn't know very much about like JCell or any of the previous episodes that you guys run through.
Yeah.
So especially as this green individual or like this brand new kind of character who has no context of anything, it's like, all right, this is a definitely different vibe that I'm catching on from everyone else, especially the relationship between Francis and Florence, who like seem like they have their shit together, and I'm just like, okay, cool. This how does Faustus like keep up with this?
When negative modifier lore, if you go back and listen to J Cell, F Cell may or may not get J Cell killed technically, or at least kicked out of the program. But we'll get into that next season. It's a whole other story. I have my personal favorite moment of NIMBY. I guess I'm gonna go around. We'll talk about them. I might steal someone's by accident. Like, we have yet to top in some ways the Florence Foxtrot moment in the investigatory room where they're kind of digging through stuff and doing the whole investigation, and it goes from normal scientific dissection to what's the right phrase? Thing moment, real goddamn quick.
Oh yeah, I remember that. I thought we were gonna die because Florence was left doing the firearms check.
That's right. Yeah, my character froze up. I think it's actually really fitting too because that was the first like paranormal experience I guess my character had in Delta Green, like entirely. So I mean, it was very fitting that like I completely locked up and it was like a what the hell moment for
Yeah,
my character. I mean, because given his background, he's used to some of this, seeing some crazy shit out there, but that was something entirely different. So
there's crazy and then there's crazy. Yeah,
yeah,
I mean, I don't think there's really any kind of low stakes situations in Delta Green, but I feel like you freezing up at a wasp in the CDC lab versus the actual big bad of the of the campaign.
starting
It's
a
like
trend for Jad characters early. Yeah,
Hey,
Hmm. Uh, you,
spoilers.
spoilers about Father Fumble. Oh God.
Yeah, one of the nicknames you have is Father Fumble. Yeah.
He's real good at rolling 88s.
Well, he's got the death curse that goes on too in some ways.
I mean, it's like what if Father Faustus feels like the nerdiest out of everyone. So, well, actually, no, never mind. I was gonna say like that may or may not be Florence.
The person with multiple degrees is less nerd than the priest.
Yeah.
I don't think you're wrong in that assessment, actually. Like, it's pretty accurate-ish.
It's compound like one, you're a priest and you're in the Navy SEALs. You're doing one cool thing, but you're at the same time like a priest. Multiple degrees. Hey, you're just studious. Uh,
Yeah.
Nonetheless, in
Definitely
terms
Florence.
of who's dying first in the horror cliches, up in the air.
Who could have seen this coming? Oh, wait.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess since we're on the topic of funny, like our favorite moments, um, I think one of mine was, and I think it was one of the ones you clipped out, was the one where we're in the back of, is it Vicky's house? We
Oh,
were
yeah, the
sleeping.
prep. Yeah, there's a audiogram clip of that out there. You're
Yeah,
talking about the prep of everyone being like, "Okay, we have this plan. It's
yeah,
obviously going to go wrong."
yeah, and we're just kind of sitting there, and it almost feels like a Home Alone, Sticky Bandits, Wet Bandit situation where we're like, okay, are we going in? How are we doing this? And we're just kind of sitting there, and it feels like something out of like some like weird like robber comedy where we're just sitting out back and it's just a bunch of people just sitting there like, okay, how are we doing this? All right, is this gonna go down this way? All right, and it's like, okay, did everybody check out the doors locked? Everyone just like sitting there. Theoretically, we're just standing there in the back waiting for
Yeah.
all this to go down where we're trying to be discreet and we're just literally waiting and making our discussion out there.
One of the key moments that absolutely blew my mind was like we were just talking about how to infiltrate somebody's backyard. And then just I don't remember if it was Francis or if it was Foxtrot who were just like, did we check to see if they're there? And like just the concept of like, hey, check to see if the cars in the
Yeah.
driveway just blew over our heads.
A lot of big planning going on. People don't even know if someone's even there to
Yeah.
interrogate.
Oh yeah, that was one of my favorite moments with that part was that, and then also I guess the unexpected disposal of Vicky, if you will.
Yeah, so do we
Like,
want to talk? I was going to say Vicky for after you guys got to do your favorite moments from NIMBY, but is it time to talk about Vicky? I guess
well,
that
I mean,
arguably that got some weird traction. People definitely had reactions to that whole episode
well,
I feel
who else wants to go about their funny like favorite moments before we move on there? I think.
because calling that
Oh,
one your favorite moment's a dark choice.
I think it's not even just one specific moment, or it's more so like the table talk where we just have to step back from the our actual characters and look at the scenario
Yeah,
and just realize just how ludicrous some of the sounds or just what of these things are. Honestly, the home invasion sequence was one of my favorite moments in the
yeah.
game just because it felt like the most cohesive, like we have laser focus and we're doing something and it's like this is what Delta Green is about. But then you realize that and you take a step back and it's just like, oh no, we're just doing some really Delta Green stuff and that's not great.
Yeah, it's a really fun, kind of involved, dynamic moment up until it becomes a really dark, messed up dynamic moment, and you're like, "I had a lot of fun doing this, but what does that say about me as a person? Not as a character, but as a person."
Oh yeah, and Relaxogen saying, or Agent Francis saying, like, "Thank God the kids weren't home." Like,
Yes.
absolutely, thank God the kids weren't
and I
home.
remember I
Yeah,
brought that up. I was like, "Hey, look, how are we going to handle this? Because we're about to get some real blurry lines if there are kids home." Like,
Yes, yes, I wasn't gonna do that to you, but I definitely like keeping the pressure on of being like, "Maybe they are, maybe they're not." Like, there's needlessly grim dark at that point. It's like, yeah, that's crossing a line that I'm not sure you can come back for on a podcast.
I will
Yeah, I don't.
say, oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I don't think Father Francis would have, or sorry, Father Faustus would have kept that first F in his title after having to deal with that.
Yeah.
Excommunicadoed.
Yeah. I will say for my character, considering like he's supposed to be a very like distant and like not so much connected individual, he showed a lot of concern for people in the group potentially going in and possibly murdering kids. Like he's like, hey, look, like if this happens, I need to know you guys are okay with it happening, kind of thing. Like my character was like in a weird way, like, hey, like my character is used to all this horrible shit. Like that's what they kind of deal with. You guys, on the other hand, not so much. Are you okay with possibly going down this path?
Well, I
So
think that's kind of like we don't talk about it much in the show because it doesn't come. There's no reason to bring it up, but like I really enjoy how you play your CIA operator, where like they are a cold and distant individual, but they're used to kind of dealing with and utilizing civilians and people in unusual circumstances. Where it's like, hey, if we cross this line, it's gonna stick with you. Are you sure you're cool with that? I don't care, but I need you functional after that. I think it's kind of it's an interesting way we kind of have stumbled backwards into being like, yeah, no, this is how this unbelievably terrible low charisma character actually manifests these aspects of him.
yeah, I just thought it was kind of funny because like we spent a good amount of time like, hey, look, are you guys sure? Are you ready? And then it turns out it was just Vicky.
Yeah.
So that was nice. But I mean, honestly, I was expecting it to be pretty messy from just because, Charlie likes to make things interesting for us. I would expect it to be kind of messy, but it's nice to see that Charlie does look out for us every once in a
Some
while.
lines, yeah. It's Vicky, like in the most like utilitarian, horrible way possible. She serves her purpose without making it extra dark in some ways to the campaign at that point. Like I'm so glad that people kind of found Vicky interesting and resonated with that whole moment, just because she is, in the weirdest way possible, the most important thing in N.I.M.B.Y in some ways, beyond the monster, beyond J-Cell starting. Like she reverberates through the rest of the campaign in a very interesting way that's important, and I'm kind of glad you guys kind of locked in and treated that moment with kind of the appropriate reverence and kind of like realized like, okay, yeah, like we made a decision. Was it the right decision? We have no way of knowing at this point in time, but like it was a decision.
It definitely was, for sure, for sure, for sure. Because it's it's interesting how Vicky was painted. Like I had to rationalize it in character as well as in person as
Yeah.
to why this action is supposed to happen. And so it's like, all right, cool. We have somebody who's at most a nuisance or a awful neighbor. But in the grand scheme of things, like inadvertent murderer with uh a biological or supernatural biological weapon,
Yeah.
unnatural biological weapon. There we go.
Yeah. Question was, she was a vector once. Could she be a vector again? And can you risk that? So
Yeah.
Especially with like the concept of like Delta Green, like it really kind of hit home. And I really appreciate Florence kind of being the veteran player and just having the capabilities of being like, hey, no, this is the reason why we need to do this, and this is what we have to do. And then Francis being kind of like the muscle of just like, we're just gonna have to do it. Like the interesting thing of like having a CDC agent and then a US Marshal just kind of leading a CIA operative and an ex-Navy or like Navy chaplain. I never really solidified that part of Faustus outside of like he was in the Navy. Now he just works at a church.
People make choices. They kind of try and reform and stuff like that. I'm sure many people go from the kind of more SOCOM-y aspects of the world to tend to find some peace somewhere. It's kind of how I've always at least interpreted Faustus in some ways. Yeah.
It's
yeah,
almost actually. I was gonna say really quick. Jad, your character, like the whole Navy guy going into priesthood, the whole vibe that I got initially with your character was actually Father Mulcahy from MASH, because he was
I
also
love
in the
Mash.
military. He was also in the military. He was he was the the priest for their unit, and he was also big into boxing. I don't know if you remember that part of his character, but he was also huge into boxing.
I don't know what
So
it is, but boxing and the Navy go together easy, because there's nothing really else to do on a ship. But boxing Catholics or boxing priests, just there's so many of them. I can't name too many, but I know that's it's a running thing. It's
If
got a running
boxing nuns
archetype.
is a trope, yeah.
Nowadays, especially with any kind of pulp or any kind of shitty movie or whatever the hell, you're just gonna have nuns doing whatever. We have
Yeah.
Velocipaster at some point that just kind of came up on Amazon.
Watched the trailer for that a couple times. I want to take the plunge and see what that madness is, but it's gonna happen eventually because I make poor life choices. Yeah. Like any other favorite moments? Like we can wrap back around and talk about Vicky some more, but I think we've kind of covered her pretty well at this point. Any other kind of favorite moments from NIMBY or kind of any moments I guess like you wish you knowing understanding the game better and kind of understanding the context of stuff, like anything people should take special note of on re-listens or just kind of hey, if you thought you understood this moment, you didn't, or this is way more important than we thought it was going to be type of stuff.
Nothing like that, but something that reoccurs, I think, that started in NIMBY is somebody asked Florence to hold up R6, and she was like, "No, I'm gonna go in the middle," and that does not change ever. I mean, she could if you want
Oh,
somebody with a 20 firearms watching your back.
the reoccurring theme of Florence will make sure Florence survives.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
I think the investigatory aspects of NIMBY was so it just really hit for me. I don't well, I think it'll be talked about beforehand, but the Wendigo campaign or the previous campaign, where was that located at?
New Hampshire.
New Hampshire. Okay, cool. So the New Hampshire campaign, or New Hampshire game, it I didn't quite understand it, and the investigatory aspects of it seemed a little oh, okay, I'm kind of finding the feeling of this. Just because the only other previous investigation heavy game that Charlie had ran me through was Tales from the Loop. Uh, and so going from a whole bunch of 12-year-olds to whoever's Delta Green is was a little bit of a jump and a change. But definitely afterwards, I think NIMBY was when, after NIMBY was when my brain kind of flipped into, oh, okay, this is how we approach stuff.
No, and I think it's something that's not talked about enough in kind of the greater context of Delta Green, but it's one of the few games that answers the question, why the hell are all these people talking to you? No, actually, why are these people being so useful and providing information that maybe it's not in their best interest to provide you type of thing? It's because you're federal agents, or you're pretending to be federal agents, or you're scaring the hell out of them at certain points in time. I think there's a couple great moments in the upcoming kind of arc, Use of the Century Club, that kind of it's the okay. There are ways you could have brute forced your way past this if you'd abused the law some, but you didn't, and that's fine. We found other ways around it, but it's occasionally kind of an interesting thing where I know how to approach some of this stuff, and kind of how you all as a group chose to go about things is always fascinating because there's some overlap, but occasionally it's oh yeah, I'd have never thought to have done that, but also why didn't they just think to flash a badge here and been we're gonna lie through our teeth and hope it pays off?
What? That's actually a handler question that I kind of wanted to ask. Is that Charlie, throughout the entirety of NIMBY,
Yeah.
what did you think that we were gonna do? How did you think that we were gonna tackle this mission?
Well, so kind of there's a fork that happens. So either you kind of go and deal with the homeless stuff kind of more aggressively. You can encounter the zombies in one of two places. I kept kind of alluding to, there's that third camp that all the people have moved into. It's not the one in the industrial district. It's not the one that's been abandoned because of all the buzzing stuff. The overpopulated one. The guy that's kind of running that, the head kind of guy in charge there, is ex Delta Green, and would be like, yeah, so I was in Vietnam. I wound up here because of what happened to Delta Green in Vietnam. If you're with the program or whatever it's called these days, you should go check this out. But also, like, it's like, yeah, we have this one person that's super sick, and that's your zombie at that point. Like, it's you can run into either zombies in the wild or a zombie in a tent in a large homeless camp type of thing. And he's already been kind of doing his own investigation, and his name is Spud. Like, the guy you talk to in the clinic gives you his name there, so you can kind of approach him and be like, hey, we're looking for the leader of this camp. And it's like, no, it's Spud. He's done some stuff. Like, he's very aware of what's going on. He just understands it's like I've been homeless for the last, God, what, 40, 50 years at this point. I'm not tapped into any of this stuff. I can't do anything because I got other responsibilities. But hey, what's a CDC officer, a CIA operator, a priest, and a U.S. Marshal all doing hanging out in this homeless camp? That seems suspicious.
I
Yeah.
mean, if anything's gonna scream Delta Green, it's just a mishmash of random backgrounds showing up and acting official.
Yeah, you all care an
Yeah.
awful lot about the homeless all of a sudden. That seems oddly out of character for your chosen professions. Except for one of you. But yeah, so there's kind of a fork you can go there. Like it's one of those things where kind of depending on how you want to put pressure on Vicky. Like, there's a couple ways that you could go in through the way you did, through the sewers, you could kind of try and sneak in through the gating system. You started going down the path a little bit with kind of exploring, could we get like a tour or something like that? You touched on it some, but never kind of fully delve into it. The security there is not great. It's just the one security post.
How
Like, it's
frustrated were you when we just kept going around and around in circles trying to figure out how to sneak into this gated community when in reality it was like as maximum security as the goddamn Warner Brothers studios and
yeah,
Animaniacs.
yeah. The answer is 0% frustrated because I think the game's at its best when it's me shutting up for 5-10 minutes at a time and the players just being like, okay, there's no way we're getting past this gate. Well, we could kill the guard. There's no way we can get past this gate without killing the guard. We could knock him out. There's no way we can get past the gate without accosting another human being. And the answer is, yeah, you probably could have gotten by there. Shift changes happen. Like, it's still in development. Like, it's also one of those things where kind of in hindsight you realize just how still in production the place is. Like, they're still building parts of it. Go get a white van and pretend to be construction workers or something like that. That would get you through probably. Like, it's just kind of how outside the box you're thinking at that point. But nothing wrong at that moment. It's just it's your decisions at that point. It's me going, I can like, from a podcast perspective, I can take 10 minutes and make it 5 minutes. It's part of why we don't live stream every session of Delta Green. Partially because I think Delta Green does a little better with some editing, and while it's great hearing the kind of conversations that happen, you don't need the 10 minutes of us being like, well, what if we did this? For like a solid 30 seconds. No, just cut that part out and make us sound super on the ball and quick and all that stuff.
Make us
Yeah.
sound official and competent.
Yeah.
Francis is asking, are you saying the sewer was not the easiest and most convenient route? Did we not have like 3 encounters in the middle of that sewer?
There's
Or did we
there's
where,
only the two zombies, I guess. But yeah, it's not the most efficient way in, but at the same time, for what you wound up doing, it's probably the best way in. Like, hey, this van came in that we don't necessarily recognize. It's on security cameras. A murder happened, then the van leaves and never comes back ever again. That's suspicious as hell.
It's a little sus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
not 4 grown-ass adults popping out in the middle of the street and just walking down
You were in a
suburban?
you were in a constructed part of it. Like, there's no one around at that section. Like, I always try and balance it with those pluses and minuses to every approach. Where it's like, yes, you have to fight 2 zombies in the dark, and you have to kind of make your way through a bunch of kind of the sewer system at that point. But there's no security cameras. You get to pop up in a part of the area where you can kind of go relatively and kind of incognito, and it's no one around to kind of see you pop out of the sewer. So it's the balance at that point of like, yeah, I could be a real hard ass and be like, oh, there's 9 people around because construction yard, but it's like, no, it's 5 p.m. in the afternoon for house construction. They're either packing up or they're gone at that point. Like, no one wants to figure out why these 4 people are doing a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle routine.
I did love the almost like 30 minutes that we had to go through for you explaining how Chicago works.
I will always feel bad about how a bunch of these cities get portrayed in this type of thing. I do take heart in the fact that occasionally we get the occasional like message or comment of like, "Yo, you were way too nice to where I live, and by the way, where I live was in an episode, so cool." I try and keep it vague so people of Chicago aren't like, "You totally messed this up." It's like, no, it's like this kinda like in a broad setting perspective. It's city stacked on top of city stacked on top of city.
I still thought that like I didn't understand like what you meant by it being like on this weird little hill or whatever the heck. I legit thought that there was a sheer cliff at the edge of this community. It's like, why would they do that? That's dangerous. They do it in Chino Hills, so like I'm used to that, I guess. But
Yeah. Oh no, and that's also kind of one of the interesting more things too. I have lived a lot more places than I think you guys have, so I more of this kind of happens throughout the campaign. But it's me explaining like, okay, here's what leafing is. Here's what fall is like in places that aren't SoCal.
I have fall now.
Yes, you have fall now. You have Pacific Northwest fall, which is not
Yeah.
quite the same, but
It's still nice fall. I'll take it. Let's see. I was trying to. There was a question I wanted to ask you. I guess okay. So my question, as far actually no, you said you were going to go into the Vicky stuff a little bit. Sorry.
we kind of talked about some. We can talk about the Vicky stuff more, I guess. Does the question pertain to Vicky or no?
No, my question was more along the lines of, what was the most obscene decision we've made so far as a team in this campaign?
Also, I'm gonna stick it just to NIMBY, and I guess what do you mean by
Yeah.
obscene? Like most ridiculous
Like,
decision?
or yeah, like what was the most like you weren't expecting it to be like a something we would come up with as an idea?
The laser focus on neck protection. The long involved conversations about how to appropriately protect the necks of the Delta Green agent. It's been my favorite. Like, I think it's a really good point. I should make more things attack their necks in the next 2 episodes, type of thing, or something. That's like, yeah, no, like it. We're kind of through it, so you can kind of look back on this. The chances of do you ever actually encounter the bugs except for that one time in the lab? Like you have the sample of it, because I wasn't quite sure how to make a fight with a swarm of bugs interesting aside for kind of, yeah, you spray it with fire and it goes away or whatever type of thing. But like the mental image of a bunch of aliens like shooting shotguns into a swarm of essentially like large bees was something I'm not sure how that would play out, but it would be interesting. But also, like, the way of triggering it was hard by design, where I'm like, how do you even roll for that? Does the swarm have a stat block at that point or something? Like, it's like a 30% lethality for like, okay, it's around your character, it's just dive bombing them. It doesn't do damage because they're still bugs, but like they just get you in the neck finally and they're in and corpse puppet.
Yeah.
I honestly still crack up whenever I like go into my character sheet on roll 20 and I still see that roofing tar torch.
It's on mine still too.
I
It like I would like to think sometimes that like Father Faustus had just left for Chicago
yeah.
just with regular luggage and had come back with like an additional check-in of a roofing tar torch that has just been in his apartment for like ever.
Yeah. Or you all put it back in the green box where it's like, like a little posted, super useful actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that was one of those ones where like, I want to give you guys a flamethrower, but not a good flamethrower, and Like, no, that's the roofing torches at that point. That's very much one bro. They were doing repairs on the building next to my house at one point. I'm like, oh, that's a flamethrower you can actually own and not have people ask a lot of questions about it.
Or the Boring Company one.
Those are honestly like glorified lighters. Actually,
Yeah.
they're
I've seen 'em.
really not useful. They're purely I own a flamethrower, something that claims to be a flamethrower, and it's like, yeah, you do technically.
Yeah.
The limited access to these materials really was interesting for me to realize just how much, or like, despite the various backgrounds of all these players, like CIA agent, U.S. Marshal, whatever, have how helpless these characters are amidst what we're actually facing, and how insanely lethal like these things can be or whatnot. The mortality of the character in Delta Green is so fascinating because like a couple good hits and you're out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I just have so much anxiety whenever you're just like, all right, cool, here comes a sand roll. Oh, all right, cool, here comes like you take this much damage, and I'm like, I only
Yeah.
can take so many hits.
Yeah. The moments that worry me when we do the campaign is when Charlie asks questions like, okay, did you guys all step in here? Or did you guys all go here? Okay, I'm gonna need a sand check. And it's like, ah, shit.
How many of you are touching the paperclip? All of you?
Yeah.
Cool.
Like I was tripped
Uh,
out. I was tripped out that like Florence had to roll that sand roll with the Vicky scene because she wasn't. I don't. Did she already leave when we had come up with the idea of make it look like
Yeah.
a fatal stabbing?
Yeah, but she knew it was coming, so
Mm,
well,
mm.
it was still on her conscience.
yeah. Well, my
I mean,
understanding too is you thought we weren't gonna stab her. Like, you thought it was gonna be a different way, and
I thought you were gonna strangle her or smother her.
yeah,
Well, like,
But
let's dive into the Vicky thing right now, because I think like the only way we could have played that scene and not come off like heartless murder hobo psychopaths was you can't do a Schrodinger's murder at that point. It's like, no, everyone has to respond to you did something complicated. Like this choice, like you may not have been the one to pull the trigger ultimately, but you were very involved in setting up the gun that then the trigger was pulled. And yeah, the guy that has the adjusted to violence, like it's a weird aspect of Delta Green where it's kind of like, no, you can be totally immune to violent sanity rules. Why? You've done this a lot.
yeah. Which is why my character was like, yeah, I'll do it. I mean, that's fine. Which is, I mean, again, also kind of fitting with the whole thing of like, hey, are you sure you want to go through with this kind of thing before we even walked in there? Because it was like, in a weird way, he was kind of caring in his own weird way, I guess.
Yeah.
Because he was like, hey, look, like, because my character understands the stuff that happens, with this will follow you. It's not something that is just, oh yeah, no, you're fine. Like, it will follow you. So
I really
yeah,
appreciate that about Foxtrot actually, especially because the way he kind of sets everything up in terms of these choices that people are going to make is that Foxtrot has already made that choice and he chooses to live with it and chooses to cope with it because he has the strength to do so. And in this weird kind of like uh mentor like situation, it's like, oh hey, are you sure you want to do this?
yeah.
Like you
And
really.
it's
It's nice
also
as me
kind
sitting
of
there doing that. Yeah, it's nice having a
yeah,
character actually and not like taking it off me being like, "Are you sure?" As the handler, I'm asking you, is this the idea you want to go? Having a character going, "Are you sure we want to do this?" Like, I'm fine with it, but you all are still normal people by my standards.
yeah.
I
And I
have
mean,
one bun. It's a dog.
yeah. I mean, and that's the thing too. Like I mean, my character is attuned to violence, so it would make sense. But it's very odd for a guy who's supposed to be very low charisma and kind of detached from everybody to have like this weird sense of like, I don't know if it's maybe the fact that people were involved in the mission that it becomes a whole thing that it's like, hey, look, even though I don't know you guys and this and that, you're part of my team as far as the mission goes, so I still have to look out for you, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, like it's kind of, it kind of works out that way. I didn't think I would play it out the way I have in that sense, but it just kind of felt right to do it that way. And like my character has consistently done that throughout the campaign. There's been like, hey, like we'll do this, but are you sure? Because
That's probably my favorite part about Foxtrot in some ways is the fact that as someone who knows you in real life, the character you're playing is so like the polar opposite of who you are. Like no puns, no kind of over the top laughter. Like it's just this merryless, we must do what must be done character. And I'm like, that's probably why we're doing this. Like, no, Alex is not some psychopath. He's actually the most well adjusted of all of us. His character, though, oh,
How old is
yeah.
Foxtrot, by the way?
I think my character. Well, I think Foxtrot's in his 40s actually. So
Okay,
he's like I think he's like mid to late 40s. So he's definitely seasoned for sure. As
I
far as
think
that goes.
because I think Faustus is the same age as well. I'd have to check the character sheet or whatever have you.
yeah, they're
So it
both
was just
around the
kind of
same age.
because it was like such a trip to have to be reminded by the CIA agent as a priest character. It's like, are you sure you want to, like, we might have to deal with kids.
Choices
And
will be
like,
made.
mhm. And uh Florence is the youngest out of all of our characters, correct?
I think by quite a bit.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
sounds like
Yeah.
almost like 10 years, I think, at a minimum. She is
Mm,
almost
mm.
as young as you can make a Delta Green agent in some ways before it gets kind of like, okay, cool, so you're a college student.
Oh
Yeah.
wow. Okay.
I
I'm
think she's 20.
22-year-old pop sensation who just saw
Okay.
some weird shit at a concert, and now I'm part of Delta Green.
I think she is 27.
27,
Okay.
20. Oh, yeah, she's 27 at the time of NIMBY, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think what is it too? Uh it is weird playing this character that's just like, because like Charlie said, it's definitely not my who I am as a person. I'm very cheery and yeah, I love saying puns. And every once in a while I do slip up. Like throughout the campaign, every once in a while I'll make a really like silly joke here and there, but it's like, ah, my character's not supposed to do this, and I just
It's so much more off-putting because of that fact, though, too. It's Foxtrot making just a pun, and you're like, why does this make it worse somehow? Like,
yeah. But it's also like because my character is so used to like doing like the action stuff and like being a little more on the like execution side of things. So like a lot of the campaign, and I think I've told you guys this before, but a lot of the parts during the campaign when there's a lot of like the investigation and looking into, I feel very like useless in some ways. So I kind of just sit there and I'm like, yes, we should do that. Or, no, that doesn't sound right. Or, oh, wait, something happened and now this is happening. Okay, well, I've got to go into this mode now.
yeah.
So, but yeah, like, in further campaigns, it becomes very, like, very obvious that I'm just kind of like, not to give anything away, but I'm very much like, I'll let the big brains do the investigation and the thinking, and when they need me to pull the trigger, I'll pull the trigger. So
I think it both it does an interesting way of parrying or kind of mirroring character experience also, but like as a Delta Green agent, it's Foxtrot being like, okay, how do I fit into this weird organization? Because of the
yeah,
four of you, he's like, I guess of the agents, he is arguably the one that, like, in theory, would be the most used to this. While simultaneously, it's like, no, you gotta think outside the box. How outside the box? Okay, here's the box, and we're all the way over here in a place where boxes no longer exist. It's only circles,
yeah.
and those
So
circles also want to murder you.
yeah, and I think this team is definitely a really nice balance. Like
Yeah,
Francis and Florence, like being like seasoned agents coming in to like work with two new agents. Like the whole dynamic works really really well. I have to say, like I really enjoyed like some of the like dialogue that kind of takes place between the characters, and like Florence has some really good moments where like she definitely like we'll kind of go a little bit obscene sometimes with some of the stuff we're trying to like think of, and like Florence is like, no, remember this is a thing, and it's like, oh, that's right. Like I gotta go out there, and Florence is like that really good like that grounding point of like reason that like keeps us solidified and
Not
like
quite the conscience, but kind of maybe like the weight keeping the ideas from floating off into the stratosphere.
yeah.
No, we
So
can't do that because we get caught on camera and arrested.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's so when it like I mean, obviously to see Florence ever get like caught off guard with anything is always just kind of a shock because she's so grounded as a character.
We had that
So
actually during NIMBY some, like the whole lab thing, where just it spirals so completely out of
Oh
control.
yeah.
I
yeah,
think of it as like, especially with Florence, with multiple PhDs and everything else like that, she should have had to deal with either like some sort of product management, production management, or project management. There we go. Not project, project management, or some sort of group project situation where it's just like you seemed like the person who's like, all right, everyone, this is the link to the Google Docs. If you are not participating, you will be removed and you will from the credits or some shit like that.
I will
Florence is
find a way to fail your ass in class. Yeah.
Florence is the character that if you were a group project and you slacked off, she would crush the group project by herself and get all the credit for it, and like completely remove you from it. Like she is the alpha of a group project, like hands down.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
And I think it works especially just because if Florence and Francis had been a group together, been a team together. Just Francis really kind of caught me off guard with how gung ho he was about a lot of stuff. I think it was the oh hey you need Francis the interrogator or to rough him up or scare the loving shit out of somebody. And I was just like whoa.
Which
Ye-
again really plays into the strengths of like Florence being like that grounding character, because like having that dynamic of like Francis and Florence works really well together. Like the have them coming in together. I know they came from previous operations, but like their dynamic was really good in this operation. And like I know there was like a little sense of initial like, well, really it's Florence and Francis, and then they just kind of picked up these two other guys to work with for the time being. But like you kind of feel a little bit more as time goes on, like there's a little more acceptance to it. But like Florence has always been that grounding character, so it's very fitting that like Florence is who she is, because it's just you have you have three other dudes who are very gung ho in a way. Like you've got my character, you've got Francis, and then of course you've got Father Faustus, and then you've got somebody to kind of pull the leashes every once in a while, or the reins, if you will. Like, hey, hold on, guys. And it works really well, and it's not in a very like dickish way. It's like in a very reasonable, like, hey, look, doesn't make sense unless you want to get caught or something. And it's like, oh no, this is a valid point. Okay.
I think the interesting thing is too, by the end of Hawthorne's Crusade, you will get a bit of a window into why Florence is like that, because you're gonna get Fiddlesticks, and Fiddlesticks is an interesting character.
I look forward to it because I've heard little things here and there about Fiddlesticks, and if it's your character, Charlie, I know it's all sorts of crazy. So
It's been fun having her in the background too, where it's kind of me playing out like her, where it's like, no, I do want to end this character in an interesting way too. Like it's part of what this campaign was designed to do in some ways, to let us kind of work through characters that we all liked a lot but got abandoned because the campaign just kind of fell apart. It's like, no, like, these characters lived on, they have a thing, like all the stuff that happened is canon, and we're not going to tell you any of it because you wouldn't know it.
It's all classified.
Yeah.
yeah,
I really liked how the group has come together and like what we are now and through NIMBY, because you were saying that it was like Florence and Francis came in and they're like, all right, we got two new guys. And that kind of like dismissive attitude made a lot of sense because in the previous operations we had done, every operation we had lost somebody. So it was like, all right, if they survive passing off, I guess it's worth getting to know them a bit better.
Yeah.
I'm liking Agent Francis's comments in the comment. Fiddlesticks will kill us if we tell you.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was trying to remember. It's like playing New Hampshire. Like, who died? And then I realized, like, oh wait, no, there's
Like
a
half
couple.
the team died.
There's a
Oh,
decent amount of people who died.
in New Hampshire is the Wendigo, right?
Yeah, it's the
Yes.
Wendigo that gets referenced every once in a while.
It's the first time
Yeah.
Florence shot a gun and the first time she killed something. Well,
It's
yeah.
Well,
it's
are we?
canonical, but not part of it. Yeah, it's like, do we want to
Yeah.
answer questions about that operation? Because
Yeah. Can we
this
reference that
canon,
operation
yeah,
now?
we have been the entire campaign. Like,
Okay. Well, I
like,
mean, like, can we actually talk about it like in full context?
yeah, why not? Like, it's
Okay.
no better time than right now to talk about the God, what did I even name that thing? The Wendigo hunt. Yeah,
Yeah.
and that one's purely, I just think, like, I have a weird obsession with Wendigos, both from I think they're cool in a mythology standpoint, also in Delta Green. They are, up until recently, criminally underused by the canonical source material just because they are so broken in so many ways. They are so dangerous.
I really wish that you had given me some sort of prior context of Delta Green outside of like what we had played with my other previous groups, so I could have just I I could have named myself like Agent Matchstick
No, it's part
rather
of the
than
process. You gotta have terrible character names so you understand just how grim and serious this game is. So you're the one asshole standing there with like the joke. It's like, oh, I'm this thing. It's like, no, we don't do that.
Yeah. I that operation is really fun to have in the background because back when we were playing, Florence had this big aversion to guns when we started out Delta Green. Like she didn't want to hold a gun, she didn't want to shoot a gun, anything like that.
Almost a phobia, even.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, basically. Like there were a couple of home scenes where she tried to go to like a range and try to shoot a gun and just couldn't do it. And
Like, we
then
actually, you even like rolled. I remember like, you rolled for those things and failed to
yeah.
see if she could shoot. Yeah, it was a thing. It's like, I'm gonna shoot this gun. No, no, you're
No,
not.
no, I'm not. But then like towards the end, yeah, Frances was in a bit of trouble and she shot a shotgun and rolled a critical and did a massive amount of damage, so it was a good character building moment.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the things I know we've talked about it before is like the dice really do play to the characters sometimes because man, there are some times when like people fail at the perfect time or people succeed at the perfect time and it's just so fitting. Like
No, and I
it's
was
so exciting.
I was talking to someone recently about this too. Like, there was the inherent problem of the percentile system, and they're talking about kind of context to Call of Cthulhu, and I'm like, well, Delta Green, your characters are a little bit better at everything from the start because they're maybe not the best people out there, but like on average,
Close.
better than average. Yeah, like they've had careers and stuff, and as a result, like yeah, I understand the complaint about this percentile stuff makes stuff feel cheap. But at least in our campaign so far, it's been like you said, just kind of really good moments courtesy of the dice where it's like, oh, this needs to happen. It didn't. But then some other character kind of stepped up in the weirdest way possible where it's like, okay, fine. Guess I'll do it myself now.
Yeah,
yeah.
there are a lot of of those moments in the most recent episodes we've recorded where the
Yeah.
dice are just great storytelling devices. No spoilers or anything, but they're just beautiful.
Yeah. As these skills get better, the failures seem so much more, oh god, no, why did I fail now?
Yeah. And
Or when
it's
you yeah.
oh go ahead, sorry.
I was gonna say, or when you get those like really insane, like 5% chance of success and you hit it, and it's like, wow, that's amazing.
Just how? How?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like the Florence saving Francis shotgun moment was definitely super clutch. Like that was such a great moment. That was from the Wendigo campaign, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's a canonical off-screen. It's weird having that whole kind of canonical off-screen like operation we did. That's like, yeah, it's a fun kind of crash course. And okay, here's how you actually pay Delta Green. Have I ever told you what I refer to, like what I call that like session we did of like what I call that version of Delta Green in my brain?
No, what do you
No.
call it?
Oh, I call not the Wendigo thing. The one time me and you played way back when.
Oh, yeah.
In my brain, I called Hyper Arcade Edition, Neon Retro, a Delta Green Edition. Because I'm like, that's the only way of describing that. I was so fast and loose with the rules by the end. I'm like, yeah, you're fighting 9 deep ones at once with 1 cut. Of course you can do that because this thing's off the rails. Screw it.
Yeah.
And I only have like a vague grasp and knowledge of like the Cthulhu mythos and everything else like that. Like I know more about Game of Thrones than I do about like Cthulhu mythos, and I've never seen an episode of Game of Thrones, but people have just talked about it like around me. And so just experiencing just Delta Green in this very just kind of like, all right, cool, like here's this. All right, everyone in your team lives except my character specifically, who tried to jump off a boat, tripped, fell to his doom, and snapped his neck. Like in the water. So
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah. It was quite the fall. But yeah, I also always will say that like the less you know about the Cthulhu mythos, the more fun Delta Green is, because it's like, no, this is how you would actually react in this situation. You're not me sitting there being like, I'm gonna take the things not meant to know in veteran package. Why? I can only fight my meta knowledge so hard up until I'm like, oh, it's obviously a deep one. I cannot stop myself. It's like, maybe it's mermaids. It's not.
Yeah. Yeah, part of me is kind of like I know some of the I know a little bit of the mythos, obviously, because we've chatted about it before, Charlie, and we've also played
You know it from the weirdest way possible. You know it from what's that game called? Secret
Secret
World
World.
and like
Yeah.
World of Warcraft's weird
They do like
repurposing
their
of some of
weird
it.
offshoot,
Yeah,
yeah. But like I tried not to look too much into it for the sole reason of like wanting to be surprised.
Yeah.
Like and there's stuff that happens down the line that's really interesting that like I was not expecting. And so
Yeah.
it's part of me is enjoying learning that for the first time as it unfolds,
Yeah, and
which
I
is
always
really
appreciate that part of it. Yeah, it's
yeah.
I just
Also
remember
very
reading it. Oh, I was gonna say I just remember reading it through high school, but much like any other kind of high school knowledge, it's just bloop.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
We're kind of coming
Despite,
up at the like what were we gonna say?
I was gonna say, despite having played Delta Green a lot, I actually also don't know very much about the mythos. I know what some things are by name, but not by description.
Mm.
Yeah. We were coming up on the point where I was hoping to have some kind of audience questions for us. We don't appear to. So we'll kind of just go right into our next kind of scheduled event, if you will, which is we're obviously not done with Hawthorne's Crusade. We have a whole rest of the campaign to go. This is what, part 1 of 5 or 6? I should have written this down how many actual arcs there are ultimately, but this is the shortest of them, I think. We're coming up on at least recording time, the longest of them. It's the one we had to do 4 sessions to get through, and
Mm.
it's a ride. It's Feast of the Century Club, I think, is one of my 2 favorites. Like, I have my favorite thing we did still, but kind of like arc start to finish, Feast of the Century Club, I think, is one of the kind of crazier ones, just because it starts off the way it does and it ends the way it does. And it's like, wow, some ground was covered from point A to point B in this nightmare race. Cool.
We do some very questionable things in the next operation, that's
Yeah.
all I'll say.
Yeah. And one of the things that I think Charlie's mentioned this before is like the consequences of what we did regarding Vicky, as far as like our actions that we took, definitely come up in future aspects of like our decision making. Like it's the whole, hey, like don't forget, like this was a thing too.
Yeah.
Like so I kind of really appreciate that our characters do reference like, hey, like it wasn't just a fleeting moment in like a Delta Green history, like for one of the agents. It's like an actual like, hey, this was a thing. This happened. Let's not forget that this is,
Yeah, and I'm gonna say
something.
it was like that whole thing by design. Like it's one of those ones where I'm not sure when I wrote that whole sequence, I was expecting it to go the way it did, but I was very aware. Like it's one of those ones where it's like, I don't know how this group will do it, but I know how Fiddlesticks would do it, and yeah, that's more or less what Fiddlesticks would have done. Maybe not quite as the way Fiddlesticks would have done it, but no loose ends. The books must be balanced is very much kind of the mindset I had for that. So it's the and a person that's kind of a weird one too. You want to do this shocking, dark moment that you guys kind of play through it, make your own decisions, but you want to make sure it's like we're not doing it just for the hell of it kind of thing. Like it's a thing that has to stay around and it kind of needs to become a character moment for everyone. And I got lucky in editing where to have start to finish the entire sequence of you're out of the sewer and then you're fleeing Vicky's house could be one episode. I was kind of worried it was going to be after editing. It's like, okay, this is going to be an hour and a half long episode, which I try to avoid doing that because an hour seems to be the right flow for this type of stuff. Like, no, it's all self-contained. It's really nice. You get to experience this crazy sequence from start to finish, and it's a thing that it it is arguably the reason NIMBY has to exist because it's like NIMBY is the dress around the thing that actually holds it up, which is oddly enough Vicky O'Neill, and Vicky O'Neill is not a great person, but we'll always debate whether or not Vicky deserved what she got, and we addressed that a little bit. Like I think like kind of the it's the shockwaves from that, the after effects come up a little bit in Feast of the Century Club because it's kind of like, okay, we did this thing that maybe we didn't have to do. Do we want to do that again? Like, how gung ho do we want to be based on the decisions we made in Chicago? And yeah, I'll also say like what happened in NIMBY is a direct lead in to Feast of the Century Club. It's you get to hear Jad struggle with my naming of characters. I do apologize again for Bolton.
I, I it's all good. It's
Oh no,
not
we'll
as
talk
bad as
about that next stream we do for that. Like, this is me being bad with musician names. I had no idea those were musicians. You're like, oh yeah, Michael Bolton. I'm like, you're absolutely right. That was a terrible last name for a character.
I think it's just so I'm just so happy that you gave me the green light to play Father Faustus again and like take that character and really like run with it a lot deeper than I had the chance to, because
Yeah,
creating that struggle to make these decisions versus like morality based versus like objective based, like you have to do this, but how much of it like bears on the soul. And I really like playing into that further with like the next with New York.
yeah. Feast of the Century Club is moral compromisation from start to finish, and some other stuff, and maybe some gambling and a couple weird green boxes, and oh yeah,
Right.
it's a ride.
I forgot that's when
Yep.
I forgot about that. Right.
Like, I love how you're such an unrelenting handler, because sometimes these dice rolls are just merciless, but it's just how deliciously merciless it can be.
Yeah.
I also love how you bait us at every green box. That has
Are you
become a
sure?
tradition. At
Are
every
you
green
sure?
box, there's always a little something of like, oh, there's a random item. And it's just like, oh, you know you shouldn't, but
Well,
damn, it's so tempting.
so we can talk about the sum because we kind of haven't it's past and kind of doesn't affect anything anymore. Do you want to know what the T
Yes.
inside the green box in NIMBY would have done?
Yes.
And
100%.
you're right, it was 100% bait. You give me a character detail, Alex, like my character drinks tea to relax, and I'm gonna put something in that green box that sure seems innocuous, but the fact it's the Innsmouth Tea Company is the only warning I'm giving you about that. But yeah, so it would have given you a disorder. You basically would have become addicted to the tea, and basically would have been it was during your home scenes you'd have been compelled to drink a cup of the tea. And after a certain number of cups, I won't tell you exactly how many because it kind of was a math problem of when it kicked in. Every time you would drink, your brain in your sleep would drift farther and farther out of reality, and basically kind of it'd be kind of this like spiritual journey thing of you floating through what you thought was space but was actually kind of slowly drifting closer and closer to the reality that you inhabit. And after a certain number of cups of tea and kind of the sleeping after it, your character sandwich leave their body. Like they're basically the kind of their consciousness would drift off and meet something that in hindsight, I'm glad it didn't happen, because what you meet is a giant spoiler for what Hawthorne is ultimately about. But at the same time, having to make you play Foxtrot slowly psychedelically tripping out at night because of this tea he's drinking, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I'm drifting past the moons of Saturn. I'm drifting past like black holes inside of black holes and all that stuff. And hey, there's Asathoth floating by," type of thing. Would have been fun. But yeah, that was definitely a green box thing. Was supposed to. It's like, okay, if they engage with this, it's a domino that kicks off a bunch of weird stuff that will mess a character up for the rest of the campaign.
There, every time we've gone to a green box, at least two of us say, "Let's not touch anything we don't need," and one of us is always like, "Maybe I want to try it out." And I mean, that makes
Dangerous.
it so much better.
It's a cowbell. How bad could it possibly be?
That's spoilers for the next one, but
That's your
yes.
that's your slight spoilers, I guess, or kind of illusion for some of what happens in Feast of the Century Club. Feast of the Century Club actually has 2 green boxes, if I remember correctly. It's got some stuff.
Look, yeah, I mean,
Was there two green
sometimes
boxes? I
Yeah,
don't
one in New
remember.
York, and then there's one in the second location.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, yeah.
yeah, sometimes the weird green box stuff pays off, like the weird ammunitions from Bobby Fischer. That's
Oh,
been
Bobby
really
Singer.
nice.
So
Bobby Singer.
we're gonna. I mentioned to bring this up. So,
Ah,
Jad, did you get the joke I was making on that?
absolutely.
Okay,
Fucking
cool.
absolutely. Like I just kept referencing balls afterwards. Just balls.
Yeah, it's Bobby Singer from Supernatural. I'm like, okay, if we're gonna have a guy making gun manuals in the world of Delta Green, let's throw a weird reference in here. So I'm like, oh, let's make it Bobby from Supernatural. And yeah, of course he'd have elder shot round recipes. There's at least 1 or 2 names per arc that, like, they're not useful, but if you get the reference, it's like, oh.
Yeah.
Agent Francis is saying you can't not take the bait. Wait until you get to I
Operation
don't
6 or 5? Operation 5, yeah.
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 There's a great green box moment. That's like later on in the story, but oh, it's so good.
Yeah, that's the problem with recording these as we do and then doing these live streams where it's like, oh, we want to tell you about this crazy thing that happens in like 3 months of episodes coming up, probably, at least.
It'll be good to talk about it once everything's done and all the
Yes.
episodes are up.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this was fun. Hopefully more people show up next time. We'll kind of keep doing these. But yes, Feast of the Century Club starts Wednesday, depending on your time zone. Maybe it's Tuesday, maybe it's Thursday. Normal time, normal place. As always, you can find it wherever. We've got a little kind of fun intro. As those who remember JCell, we have a kind of fun recap of NIMBY if you missed an episode or just need a reminder of what happened in the sprawl that was the NIMBY campaign. If you hadn't figured it out by now, the Hawthorne's Crusade is meaningfully longer than JCell Files was. I think we're now close to. If this was just JCell, we'd be half done with JCell by now. I think, give or take a little bit. But yeah, this is a trip, and it's about the journey and the nightmares I throw at the players along the way.
Yeah. There's definitely a lot of that. A lot of it.
Yeah,
But
This
it's been fun though this whole time. Like I've had a lot of fun. This is the oh well. So I guess just to give some context, the first Delta Green game I played was actually it was that one off with the
last things last. You can find it on the YouTube channel. It used to be in the podcast. I kind of took it out because it's a great ride. It's not quite kind of quality wise up to audio wise my standards, so it's no longer part
yeah.
of the main feed, but it's on
just
the
throw
YouTube
it as
channel.
like a Delta Green annex.
Thank
Like
you for giving me that segue. So it is on the Patreon. I think it is on the Ko-Fi. Well, it's definitely on the Patreon. But yes, if you want to support the show or kind of maybe help me cut down my editing time to help speed this along, go support us either of those places. We have some behind the scenes stuff. We will have a blooper reel for Hawthorne's Crusade at the end of it of kind of stuff that got cut from the podcast or got condensed from the podcast that maybe tonally wasn't the best, or kind of was a weird tangent we went on, but was funny and in character, kind of funny, and just like us laughing our asses off for a solid 30 seconds, and one of us like at the end, oh, I can't breathe, I'm laughing so hard at it. But yeah, maybe not mainstream podcast appropriate, but if you're enjoying our ridiculousness, definitely worth your time listening to potentially. It's very easy to get access to that stuff. I will admit it's kind of just it's the ad-free stuff for the time being and a couple extras in there.
Mhm.
But if you're looking for something more tangible, something you can hold, we do have a merch shop where you can get shirts like the one I'm wearing and some hoodies and some hats and some stickers and stuff like that. But no pressure to go do that. But if you feel like festooning yourself with some merch, we got you covered on that one, both literally and mildly metaphorically. But yeah, looking forward to how people react to Feast of the Century Club. If you thought N.I.M.B.Y was crazy,
Shit's gonna get
oh
weird.
yeah, shit gets weird.
Feast
I'm
is
just
so good.
I'm just so excited to have to explain just the struggle I go through every single time I play this game.
I think like the most kind of like this is like totally not related to the podcast or negative modifier even remotely. We were playing something else. And we were doing something, and I get the text from you. Am I about to have to roll a sanity check? And I'm like, I should make you roll a sanity check right now.
Even a mechanic like
Yeah.
in the game.
Why are we playing Delta Green? We're not playing Delta Green. You're always playing Delta Green. But yeah, looking forward to that. Plenty more Delta Green coming down the future for you. We're in an interesting situation too, where we are about to be done recording Delta Green. We'll have a little bit of landing, kind of a runway for us to do some stuff in. So, if there is a game you would love to see us tackle in some way, shape, or form, I'm still putting together the list of kind of our in between Delta Green seasonal games right now. Send me those. Shoot me those requests on Twitter if you got something you think we'd enjoy. As of right now, it looks like we'll probably do a little bit more Sumbaroom because people have been requesting that. I'm gonna try and maybe squeeze some Coriolis in there because space stuff is fun. It looks like we'll probably be doing those Dark Places. I hope I got that name right because it's one of those games I read through and it's like, hey, it's a thing I already have ideas for. It'll be a kind of a fun, self-contained story. But yeah, we'll kind of post up more stuff as we kind of make that list come together in a more meaningful way. Plenty of more fun things to come.
Or one of those games called Zumba Room. What was that?
Sumbaroom.
Zumba Room. Okay.
For me, Zumba Room is the lore now.
You know, it's not wrong in some ways. And on that note, thank you for joining us. Thank you for tuning in. If you're catching this in archive form, thanks for watching. Hopefully, you enjoyed the podcast. And that is it for us, unless anyone has anything else kind of major to say before we kind of sign this off.
Oh, I guess we should pimp out our social medias.
Oh, yeah, yes.
We
Go around with you
got.
guys first.
So you can catch me on Twitch, Instagram, Twitter, basically all the social medias. My handle is Mave Online. It's MAVEONLINE, and it's the same across everything. So very likely, if you go on that specific social media, that will be mine. I even have it on the Wikipedia social media site, which is like WTS or something like that.
Yeah.
I even snagged it there. So yeah, if you're interested, I stream mainly MMOs, usually Friday and Saturday nights on Twitch, but I also am dabbling in Final Fantasy 14 now, but I mainly do WoW. So, yeah, that's me.
Don't have-
I or go ahead.
No. Go ahead.
I have Twitter, and the handle is just at Dylan. That's DYLAN 1898. That's it. Also, that's Kima, but that's not too important. She's just hanging out.
I don't do shit on any kind of social media. You could
That's
follow
fair.
me. Yeah, I mean, I guess you could end up like on my.
Look at this guy not engaging with social media. Nerd.
It's the most
I mean, like-
Celtic Green S thing. Is like, I don't have any social media.
I do have social media, but it's just like I don't really stream on Twitch. You can find me at Baradojin, Baradojin. I have an Instagram. I post about plants and food. That's Jadicus Finch, JADDICUSFINCH. And my Twitter handle is FKA heterosexual. So I'm not funny on the internet. Sorry if you end up following me.
And you can find me as MORD4K on most social media platforms. I'm pretty good at that. It's pronounced Mordak, but however you want to pronounce it's fine. More importantly, make sure you're following Negative Modifier places. It's NegModPod on Twitter. We're on this as Negative Modifier everywhere else, basically. But yeah, no, it's the best way to keep up with news for us. It's active-ish is the way of thinking of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. That'd be the fastest way to get a hold of us. Also, if you want to write us, you can email us at negativemodifier@gmail.com. If you go to negativemodifier.com, there's links that'll get you to kind of all the relevant stuff you might care about in such categories. But yeah, thanks for joining us for this. Thank you for listening. Keep on listening. I know it sounds promoty to say it, but it gets crazier and weirder and better from really this point on type of thing. And yeah, I'm not throwing this out ahead of advance to kind of get ahead of this one. There's gonna be 2 episodes during Feast of the Century Club where the audio quality has some problems. I couldn't fix it all the way. I got close. I'm sorry.
I will say, starting Feast of the Century Club right around Thanksgiving seems kind of fitting.
Oh yeah, the timing is fantastic for this.
Oh no. Didn't even realize.
I'd like to say I planned this one. I did not.
Just
Yeah.
like the dice, it'll all work out in the end.
Yes,
Yeah.
it does seem that way. But yeah. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah. Peace.
Thanks.